I know what it's like to live in darkness. I know what it's like to have dark thoughts that don't feel like your own. When I was younger, I went to church and I loved it. I loved the worship and I loved wearing dresses. When we moved out of state, we stopped going to church and I felt really isolated and alone in my house. That's when the enemy came in, and I had thoughts that were not of God. It was a hard time. I thought God had abandoned me. I thought that He didn't love me. And from there on, I was in darkness. When I turned 16, I started spiritually seeking again. I got into yoga, meditation, astrology, tarot cards. But it didn't get really bad until 2020 when the pandemic hit and I was stuck in my house. I had been waiting tables and that was my identity. I worked, I made money, I came home and I drank. But when the pandemic hit and I was stuck in my house, I realized that I was wasting my life. I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. So I started seeking again. I got even further into the astrology and into the tarot, and specifically into witchcraft. I started praying to the moon on full moons. I started having new moon ceremonies. And I thought that I had found it. I thought that I had found the way that I was going to heal the hurt that I had inside of me. But it was never enough. I could never do enough spells. I could never know enough about my astrology or do enough tarot readings to fully heal the wound that was in my soul. In the summer of 2022, I joined a course to manifest money, and it had a couple hundred other women who were in the course. And at the very end, we all lit a money candle together. And I believe that this opened the door for the enemy to come into my home and take advantage of me at a vulnerable place. The following month, I experienced the most invasive dark thoughts I had experienced since I was isolated as a 13-year-old girl, alone in my room, feeling like God had abandoned me. There was not enough meditation or crystals or astrology reading that I could do to get this darkness to go away. But Jesus had been knocking at my door since the beginning of summer, but I was ignoring him. I didn't want to be a Jesus person. I didn't want to be a Christian. But in August, I was at that point where I was like, I've got to try something different. Something's got to give. Something has to change. And I had Miss Arlene up at the fruit stand speaking life into me. And I'll never forget, there was one day when JJ was working and he invited me to church. And I cried on the way home. And I just couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain why it touched my heart so much. So I decided to go. And the first service, it was amazing. The worship music, the sermon, it all touched my heart so much. And I knew pretty instantly that all the things I had been involved with had to stop. So I packed up my altar, my books, my wand, my crystals, my cards, and I put them in my spare room. I gave my life to Jesus, and it was the best decision I've ever made. But an even better decision was when I decided to burn all of my witchcraft items on Halloween night. It was Holy Spirit led. I was up late and I just felt this pressing of go burn it, go burn it, go burn it. So I did. I started a fire at probably like 11 p.m. and I burned everything. And I prayed to the Lord, and I watched the smoke rise to the sky, and I said, Lord, let this be a sweet incense to your nose. Let this be my giving everything to you. Everything that I thought was real, you are what's real. You are what's true. And I surrender it all to you. I got baptized a week after I burned all of my witchcraft items, and it was amazing. It felt victorious. I went in thinking, man, that water's gonna spit me out. But it didn't, and it felt so fresh and so new to be born again and really giving my life to the Lord. Because He lives, I have been born again. I can face my past because He lives. I can face my failures because He lives. I can face my future because He lives. I can seek His face because He lives. I was delivered from dark thoughts because He lives. I was born again because He lives. I was redeemed because He lives. I was set free because He lives. Because He lives.